Let's take a look at some information and charts on EOS for Brave New Coin. So we're going to start every video on EOS in regards to its market cap relative to its treasury, the parent company Block 1. Currently the market cap of EOS is 5.9 billion. Block 1 holds 6.27 billion as of the last reporting. They hold that in BTC. They hold other coins as well, I assume. You'd have to check their most recent filing or report, quarterly report. But just their BTC holdings are bigger than the entire market cap of EOS. So that's a bit problematic from my point of view. You know, why don't they just buy EOS? Why don't they have a buyback program? Why don't they give that BTC back to the EOS community? You know, put that BTC to work. If EOS is so great, why don't they invest in EOS? This could be one of those investments. They're launching something called Bullish Global, which immediately doesn't pass the sniff test on a name alone. It is a new blockchain-based cryptocurrency exchange designed to combine the performance, user privacy, and compliance offered blah, blah, blah. So it's a DeFi play with a terrible name. Whoever thought of this name should be fired. Whoever approved this name should be fired. What were they thinking? Just name it something with no connotations, right? Calling it Bullish Global is just the scammiest, worst name I can imagine. Call it anything else, okay? Call it Ticonderoga. You know, I don't know. Just call it anything with no name that sounds like you're trying to pump something. This is so reminiscent to me of Long Island Iced Tea, blockchain Long Island, Kodak blockchain, where they're just trying to add a name to something and give it value. It's just cringe. Anyway, EOS is delegated proof of stake. The top 21 block producers take part in confirming the transactions. Now, I don't know how many total full nodes exist on EOS, if any. I don't know how many of these block producers run full nodes. I don't know the size of the full nodes. And this is kind of a foreshadowing for ETH as ETH switches to proof of stake, because thus far, in my opinion, we haven't seen a successful proof of stake network that has done well based on price, arguably. You know, there's EOS, there's Tezos, there's a few others that are older that have kind of done nothing. If we look at this list, something else that's problematic, as far as the votes are concerned, among the top 21, 63% of the votes are in Asia, 37% are in China, and 30% of these are exchanges. So there's problematic centralization issues with the way these votes are spread out. Very few of these are in the US. I mean, there's one in the US, two in the US that I can see here, 3 in North America if you count Canada. So a bit of a disparity here. I don't see any in Europe at all. So it's mainly Asia exchange show as far as I can tell. So from a governance perspective, everything's fine until it isn't. And when they have some sort of governance dispute, or if, let's say, China cracks down on EOS for whatever reason, I don't know, right? They just cracked down on Bitcoin miners for the 50,000th time. That's going to be problematic for the network, at least in the near term, if China were to ever say anything about EOS, right? Not saying they will, just that is a glaring problem with the block producers here. Now, you can shuffle your votes. It is like representative democracy, and we can go and use some other block producers, right? So that's the beauty of this type of system. There are 21 at the top based on voting who gets the lion's share of the staking rewards, basically. But there are up to 100 of these waiting in the wings to take over should any of these above falter for whatever reason. If we look at the top dapps on EOS, I'm looking at 30-day users and 30-day volume specifically. The top dapp is basically Decentraland on EOS. There are a few DeFi things that aren't really household names. I don't think anyone has really heard of them. Maybe that's just me. I'm not an EOS fanboy, so maybe that's why I haven't heard of some of these. They have their social thing, yep, but volume-wise, most of it is like DEX-related stuff, which is fine, you know, and it's not in the billions. And you have to compare it to ETH because most of the volume is on ETH. Most of the users are on ETH if we sort by volume. The top 12 are in the billions in volume for the 30-day. activity. So you're just not seeing a robust DeFi, anything really on EOS just yet. Maybe you never will. So that's also something to consider when you're thinking, okay, where's the party happening? It's not happening on EOS, even though fees are arguably zero or negligible relative to ETH. People would rather spend an insane amount of fees on ETH than try to play around with EOS, based on what I can tell. ETH is winning that race pretty handedly based on the numbers. Looking at transaction counts in the line here, transaction counts for EOS have been rising slightly, but they've been extremely volatile again. And anytime you see that for any metric, I immediately think this isn't organic, this isn't real, this is some sort of bot activity. You don't have a bunch of people using the network one day and then 60% of those transactions dropping off. It just doesn't make sense. This period between January 2020 and September 2020 was probably the most organic looking period. This is normal and natural. To see these spikes, peaks, and troughs so quickly since March is a bit weird. Total block count has been steady relatively, so there haven't been major issues. They had a big issue here with an airdrop that kind of crippled the chain, but ever since then they've been doing quite well in that regard. And that's kind of really all I have to say about the fundamentals of EOS. I'd watch for whatever Block 1 is doing. I'd watch for whatever Daniel Larimer is still doing on EOS. EOS Rex, and not something else that just kind of, I don't hear much about it. You know, they're trying, you got to say that. They're trying to do stuff. They're building empty cathedrals maybe, you know. No one's really showing up so far. If we look at the MA multipliers, this is the 183 multiplier down here. This is 5 times the 183. So it's the half year MA multiplier. And historically for EOS, the midline or just above the midline has kind of been the top. And the recent top has followed that schematic pretty well. We even dipped into the buy zone pretty quickly here. So we're definitely closer to a relative bottom than a relative top. And this pulled back from above 15 to sub 4. I mean, that's a nasty drawdown super quickly. So even with months of consolidation, an entire year since March, really, prices were rising everywhere. And then alts kind of had their thing since January, and EOS still kind of struggled to make a move there. Another thing for EOS is it's not really listed in too many places. So listings always help price, just because if the pairs are available elsewhere to trade, people will trade them. If you look at the Bitfinex long short data, VPVR, yearly pivots, 5200 EMA, and RSI, we're still mega net long on Bitfinex. We stabbed through the R5 yearly pivot and then came right back to that R1. So anytime anything's at the R5 yearly pivot, that just says since the beginning of the year, it's had a massive move. So it's always a be careful type of zone. There's plenty of volume levels on the way down at 5, at 8, at 350. It's unlikely, I think, that EOS droops below 260 unless there's a broader bear trend in the market, just because there's so much consolidation volume at that level. So trend-wise, this still looks okay. It's above the 200. It's got a bullish 5200 cross. It's just hard to want to trade this as a trader because it does nothing for an extended period of time, briefly has these spikes that immediately get sold off over and over and over again. So if you're trading this, you have to actively be paying attention to what's going on here because it can go against you so quickly. So really large mess of a chart there. And on the 3-day cloud, we have to zoom way out because it's so trendless, really. The 3-day cloud still looks okay. Since January, February, it's been above the 3-day cloud, really for the first time ever. But this is one of the few pairs I wouldn't even trade using the cloud, because what are your signals here? You know, I told you to go long for the first time in 5 years this January, and now it's saying it's below support. It's sort of in no man's land. You know, there isn't really great trading signals there. EOS-BTC, though, on the cloud, it's pretty clear. You know, it's been below the cloud basically its entire life. On the 2-day chart anyway. Again, I'm zooming out because I have to. Anything lower than that gets super noisy. It has these attempts to pull up and then just can't. Finally, it had this W double bottom at all-time lows and had a nice little move through the cloud. But again, it's not above the cloud here. It's very much in neutral territory. Not anything I'd want to hold just yet until it's above 2K sats, really. And looking at EOS ETH, also at all-time lows, tons of volume down here on the 2-day cloud. Very clearly not an ETH killer thus far. And that kind of shows based on the dapp volumes and user numbers. This could be setting up for some sort of accumulation, you know, so maybe watch this into 2022. I would watch this because if ETH proof of stake starts to falter for whatever reason, these other projects could potentially take over, right? Just like there's 21 block producers and there's 80 on standby. If ETH proof of stake fails, there are plenty of proof of stake networks on standby waiting to pick up the slack there. But right now, this definitely looks relatively bearish. You know, I mean, it's at all-time lows. You can't really get too excited about that. All-time lows against BTC, against ETH, it just doesn't look strong here against either pair. So this may have a resurgence into 2022, but right now it doesn't look too great. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund on Techemy, ETH-BTC fund on enzyme.finance that I trade for Techemy Capital. Non-custodial portfolio management. You can send ETH or USDC into a smart contract, and that allows me to trade those funds through DEXs. You can see the trades I make. You can see who's depositing, who's withdrawing. You can see performance, AUM. We also have a DeFi portfolio, which has gotten hammered over the past month. This one is based more on fundamentals than technicals. And we have a smattering of DeFi coins here. So that's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.